The undead, or what's more commonly known as zombies, are a source of both entertainment and horror, whether you're playing a game or watching a film. But what about in real life? Today we'll talk about the first close encounter set in the late 15 to early 1600s. We will learn about the creation of Jamestown, one of the first colonies, the struggles that the people had faced, and why it led to the colonists eating each other, how the town had recovered, and finally, what led to the downfall of Jamestown. In 2012, Jamestown archaeologists working in the James Fort cellar discovered the mutilated skull and severed leg bone of an English teenage girl. She was found among butchered animal bones and other remains discarded by the Jamestown colonists during the starving time in the winter of 1609. Now, what conditions led to this child and many others being cannibalized? Well, it all starts when the Virginia Company sent out workers on a ship to America in search of fortunes and opportunities. Virginia Company sent workers led by John Smith and George Percy to Jamestown in May 1607. The first settlers, traveling on the ships named Susan Constant, Godspeed, and Discovery, landed on May 13th in 1607 and chose a site for their settlement, which they named Jamestown after King James. The workers were promised land, but they agreed to hard labor for a minimum of 5 to 7 years. The relations between the native Indian tribes and the colonists were strained due to John Smith's strong-arming trades of the native tribes. His goal was to try and overcome the 7-year drought that only continued to get worse. The starving time in Jamestown, which occurred during the winter of 1609 to 1610, was a brutal period for settlers. Tired of being forced to give food to the colonists, the Powhatan Confederacy, led by Chief Powhatan, laid siege to the colony, cutting off their access to crucial food sources, including supplies brought by English ships. This conflict was part of the larger First Anglo-Powhatan War, which had been escalating due to increasing tensions between the English settlers and the Powhatan people, eventually injuring John Smith and allowing George Percy to take over. This skirmish directly led to the colonists quickly building a defensive fort, known as James Fort, to protect themselves from further attacks. But this just made them hungrier, as all food supply had been cut off. George Percy wrote in his journal that Indians killed as fast without the fort as famine and pestilence did within. The colonists, faced with extreme shortages of food, resorted to desperate measures to survive, including eating animals such as horses, dogs, and even rats. The harsh conditions led to the death of about 70% of the colony's population. Starvation severely weakened the colonists, leading to diseases like dysentery and typhoid. The settlers eventually resorted to cannibalism, which George Percy wrote the colonists licked up the blood which had fallen from their weaker fellows. Surfaced by wounded colonists with skirmish from the natives, some settlers began digging up the dead to eat them, while others were reported to have immediately eaten fellow colonists who had weakened and died. The survivors of this crisis were eventually rescued in the spring of 1610 by a supply ship sent by the Virginia Company. The incoming ship carried their new governor, Lord de la Warr, who ordered that they were to regroup and rebuild Jamestown. Thanks to new leadership, reinforcements and supplies were sent to Jamestown, and they were able to build better relations with local Native American groups, particularly the Powhatan. While this episode was horrific, it also marked a turning point for the settlers and the colony. After the starving time, Jamestown slowly recovered. The introduction of tobacco farming, along with more organized and sustainable supply lines, helped the colony eventually become profitable, ensuring its survival. After a few years of rebuilding relations with the Indian tribes, and thanks to the help of a new product, they began to start farming tobacco. Jamestown entered into a period of prosperity. In the year of 1614, Pocahontas, who was the daughter of the chief running the Powhatan tribe, was married off to an Englishman known by the name of John Rolfe, who happened to be a significant farmer of tobacco in Jamestown. In the year 1619, an order from the Virginia Company was sent to Jamestown. The governor rallied an assembly to discuss the news that just came in. The Virginia Company sent an order to establish a government system which read, "To establish one equal and uniform government over all Virginia, and provide just laws for the happy guiding and governing of the people they're inhabiting." According to historians, the Assembly's work covered a wide range of business, including commercial and economic arrangements for the colony, regulating moral offenses, overseeing matters of religion and relations with the Powhatan Indians, as well as acting as a legislative body. The Assembly served as a court and adjudicated between settlers in cases involving Indian peoples. The Assembly was an important part of the Great Reforms that swept away the existing military government and created a new democratic society based on the rule of law and consent of the governed. Historians have also pointed out that the General Assembly was the first representative governing body to meet in North America or anywhere in the Americas. After the reestablishment of James Fort, the settlers quickly spread eastward into a small area called Newtown. Jamestown was a focal point of the Virginia colony and developed into a thriving port town. Thousands of colonists would arrive and depart as tobacco fueled the quickly expanding population. In the 1620s, representative government took hold, and the town grew into James City, where legislative business demanded infrastructure such as inns and taverns. In the area, on the east side of the fort, the colonists built more substantial homes and large shoreline warehouses there. Even as the colony grew beyond Jamestown, many of the wealthy plantation owners retained property in the town into the year of 1676. In 1676, a rebellion, led by Nathaniel Bacon, sacked and burned much of the capital town. Nathaniel Bacon, furious with the government's passiveness to address the problems of the falling tobacco prices, and the colonists wished to expand, but they were restrained due to the native Indian tribe conflicts. This led to Bacon mobilizing a pseudo-army build of angry farmers and colonists, and began to fight the Indians, hoping to force the governor's hand and force them to help. When he realized that they would receive no help from the government, Bacon led his militia to Jamestown, which had become the capital of Virginia, to burn down any buildings they found and eventually marked the end of Jamestown when it was decided to relocate the capital instead of rebuilding it. In this video, we learned that the creation of the colonies were no easy task, and that without proper planning and funding, being a new colonist easily became a nightmare for the colony. On top of not being able to grow food, they also didn't have anything they could sell or trade with the local Native American tribes, and that forced them to take from the Powhatans. Then, after a few to many bad trades, the Powhatan began to refuse and fight back. The colonists, with no food or supplies, had no choice in the matter but to barricade themselves inside Jamestown and build a fort around it. The only thing they had to eat were the animals and wildlife that stumbled inside the fort through gaps. The growing hunger eventually led to them eating their own when they got injured or died from the Powhatan's attacks. Next, we learned that when relief finally came, the new lord quickly realized tobacco could thrive in the environment of Jamestown and began to set up trades with the Powhatan and repair their relationship. And finally, after about 60 to 70 years of growth and prosperity, the colonists began to yearn for more land, and this led to another bout with the Native American tribes in the area and downfall of Jamestown when the government refused to support the colonists' wish to expand, which led a rebellion to burn down Virginia's first capital, Jamestown. Here are some questions you might consider after the recap. If you were one of the colonists and headed for Jamestown in 1 week, what would you bring? What happened to the citizens of Jamestown after it was burned down and abandoned? Why did the leaders of Jamestown take so long to notice tobacco flourish there? And the most important question, why did the colonists resort to cannibalism instead of stealing enough supplies to make an escape back to England if things weren't working out?